Hello again, everybody. Brian Schwager here, founder of Wellness Movement Services, here with another self-empowering video presentation, empowering you to take control of your wellness and movement. In this second series, we're going to be touching base on feeling and moving well, or why we should be feeling well before we move well. How we feel affects how we move, ladies and gentlemen. Lifestyle factors have a direct relationship to increase risks for injury. Now, we know that lifestyle factors, and when I talk about lifestyle factors, what am I referring to? High cholesterol, blood sugar imbalances, diabetes, cancer risk, cardiovascular risk, neurological illnesses, autoimmune illnesses. All of these and more of these diseases, the body's not at ease, are directly related to lifestyle. But when I say to you that your back, the back challenge you're presenting me, a shoulder challenge, knee or hip, if I were to say your lifestyle has something to do with those injuries, you would kind of go, yeah, I guess, but explain. And that's what I'm here to do today, is to lift the veil of deception when it comes to understanding that, to me, what I have come to learn after 40 years, 27 years of clinical experience, and right now, as of 2022, what I've come to understand at this point in my career is that lifestyle factors and habits have everything to do with movement, let alone how I was teaching in the 90s, how we needed to change our lifestyle habits to decrease our chances for illness or disease. All right, so let's get started. So first, we're going to do a quick overview, and we have to start with my disclaimer. This information is for educational purposes only. Let it be fully understood that all the information in this presentation should not be interpreted as a diagnosis and/or treatment of disease, physical impairments, or to prescribe a remedy for a specific medical condition. The presenter of this material is not a duly licensed physician and acknowledges that only a medical doctor has the right to diagnose and treat disease and physical impairment. All right, we got that out of the way. Now, as a quick review, if you didn't see my first series, the first series was an overview of my 4 principles to wellness and movement. And you'll notice that the motto, feel and move well. I did that on purpose. I understand that we should move well before we move often, which is the tagline for Functional Movement Systems. This is the organization where I received my certification as a functional movement screen specialist, level 2, and selected functional movement assessment specialist, level 1. But yes, you should be moving well before you move more. What's the sense? If you're tight and you have imbalances and you want to go out and move more, well, that's a recipe for injury. And that's one of the main reasons I went to school and studied through the functional movement system. However, as I was rebranding my business, where I was focusing on functional movement and focusing on assessing movement, I was always focusing on lifestyle ever since the 90s. Sometime I'll explain all the businesses that I created between 1990 and 2000, and how it morphed into what I'm doing now as a wellness movement service. So how we feel affects the way we move. So what's our review? The 4 principles, and what we're talking about primarily is lifestyle. So we're going to touch base on the first 3 primarily. So emotional health, how we handle stress; biochemical health, how we sleep; nutritional health, how we digest; and yes, are we moving? Are we sedentary? And I'll get into some of the movement related questions that help to raise the bar when it comes to a subjective finding of lifestyle. So if I ask somebody, the first three questions, or the first three principles, questions for those areas. It's pretty obvious I'm going to get a pretty good idea of their lifestyle factors. And then I'm going to ask them a lot of questions about their body, their physical health. And that's just subjective. And it's already drawing a picture that that person's not only not feeling well based on the questions that I asked for principles 1, 2, and 3, but that might and will, as you'll find out today, that has a direct impact on how we move. So let's start out with some statistics. So this is a post from my Wellness Movement Services Facebook page. I would encourage you to go there. There's no fluff, no fake news. Everything's authentic and 100% real, truthful news. Here it is, solving the $1 billion challenge. How many of you out there right now had an injury? How many of you out there right now know that you have muscle imbalances? How many of you out there even know what muscle imbalances are? I'll give you just a brief description of that. If one side of your body is tighter than the other, or if you have strength imbalances, let's say the front of your body is over strong compared to the back of your body. These are imbalances that will lead to these challenges you have. Musculoskeletal challenges have become one of the largest costs to insurance companies worldwide, but the highest cost is to our own long-term health. So you look at the 1.71 billion individuals worldwide have a musculoskeletal condition. Now, you have to understand, I worked in the industry, 27 years working clinical. I've seen this up front and I've seen it grow. 568 million of these cases are low back pain. Man, I could do a whole presentation, and I have done a whole presentation just on low back pain because of how many low back pain patients I was seeing. 1 in 2 adults experience musculoskeletal pain. 80% of these chronic conditions can be prevented with lifestyle changes. Well, what is lifestyle change? What do lifestyle habits have to do with my shoulder, Brian, or my knee, my back? I'm going to get to that. Ignoring these challenges and are referring to them as part of the normal aging process and as normal aging pains has not worked. It is up to each of us to take this global musculoskeletal crisis into our own hands as an orthopedic fitness professional. I have been on the front lines, sorry about that, for over 30 years and have seen this challenge grow firsthand. So we have all these musculoskeletal conditions. We have all these people with low back pain. We didn't even talk about knee pain and everything else. And we have all these people experiencing pain. But what strikes me as curious here is we have more medical doctors with better education than we did 30 years ago. We have more physical therapists. And again, all of these that I'm going to mention have a higher level of education now than they did back in the day. We have more surgeons. We have more occupational therapists, personal trainers, coaches, massage therapists, etc. But yet we're still seeing these things go up. So I'm not the only one looking at this. In fact, when I go back to this post, this was something I learned in a webinar that I was on. I've been on 3 webinars in the last month, and all of them had to do with this topic in some way, shape, or form. So why is it growing? And these individuals or organizations that put these webinars out are on the cutting edge. They're the ones that I study under, because in my world and how I practice as a corrective holistic exercise kinesiologist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is I address the body as a whole. I look at interdependence. I look at the interrelationship of everything in the body, not just, when we think of the word interrelationship. So when we talk about the interrelationship or the integratedness of the human body, I'm going to show you, this is something I share with my clients and when I teach my mentoring students is this. This is a joint by joint concept that I learned from Gray Cook of functional movement systems. And when we look at the parts of the sections of the body that need the most stability, so let's start from the top, lower to middle and lower middle neck, shoulder blades, low back, knees, and feet. Those are the primary areas of stability. Now, the primary areas of motion or mobility is the upper neck, shoulders in general, upper back, hips, ankles, and toes. So when we look at reducing our chances for injury, and somebody comes to me with a knee problem, I always tell them you don't have a knee problem, you have a body problem. And I would rather say you have a body challenge, because challenges can be solved. And they look at me like, oh, okay, so what does that mean? Well, I say, well, your knee is unstable. And if I look at the muscles up the chain, so let me bring up the anatomy here. So you have a problem with your knee. I look at whatever side it is. So we'll say the right side for the sake of this image here. I look at the motion of the right ankle, the stability of the right foot. So the mobility of the right ankle, the stability of the right foot, the mobility of the right hip. And then I go across. I check for tightnesses in this muscle here. I check for the motion, the mobility in the shoulder, and then I go up to the neck. So let me go back. So again, if somebody's presenting me with a knee challenge, stability challenge, I look at the motion of the ankle. I look at the stability of the foot. I look at the motion of the hips. Okay, and then I cross over, look at the big muscle that attaches to the shoulder, and then I look at the shoulder, and I'll look at the motion of the upper back and the upper neck. Now, that's not all I do, but just to draw that real quick for you, that's how I look at a client that comes to me with a knee issue. That's how I do it. That's only the mechanical. So what does lifestyle factors have to do with that, Brian? Well, they have everything to do with it, because we know that when we are not healthy, so as I explained in series 1, when each principle, and after I rate, so let's say, for instance, this was the person that was complaining of knee problems, all right? And maybe their score was a little higher, but just follow me here. And I subjectively rated their wellness and movement. So I have 2 ways that I can consult with them. All right. So let's look at that. So I either have a wellness movement survey or lifestyle consultation. The survey consultation is a lot shorter. The lifestyle consultation is comprehensive. I have to ask a lot of questions. If you have a mystery, which my clients do, my clients come to me because nothing else has worked, or they need more, but let's just keep it simple. So they come to me and they get referred to me, and they've had this challenge on and off for anywhere between 3 and 18 years. And they want to get to the cause of it. So I ask them a lot of questions because nobody can figure this out. I love the cases nobody can figure out. And the mystery is in the history. right? So as I started asking them questions about their lifestyle, I began to find out, oh, well, their emotional stress rating was real high based on the type of questions that I asked them. All right. Like, if I asked you what were the 5 most stressful events in your life, and then I asked you, how do you handle stress? Do you react more than you respond? Are you quick to getting irritated? How is your life going? I mean, how is the finances? How is your job? How is your relationship? I don't need to know details. I save that for the holistic therapist, which I may have to refer them out to. But I need to know if somebody says to me, we are having financial challenges in our family right now, or I'm having relationship issues right now in my family. That's elevating their stress response, because your mind is like a CPU computer. This computer, so we have a central processing center called our brain. And within the brain, there are multiple systems, starting with the limbic system, which is the part of the brain involved in our behavioral and emotional response, especially when it comes to the need for survival. So even this limbic system alone can disrupt these other functional areas of the brain. So you could see how important it is for lifestyle factors, especially emotional health, and how it can affect the functions of the body in general. And when you're under a lot of emotional stress, you are living in, if you're chronically under a lot of emotional stress. And I'll tell you, there's acute stress and there's chronic stress. Acute stress is you got into a car accident. Boom. And chronic stress is the kind of stress that's in the back of your mind. I call it's stealth, because it's kind of under the radar. Financial problems. Gosh, I wish my relationship was better. You're constantly thinking of these little stressors. So when you're acute, you go into sympathetic drive. And when you go into sympathetic drive, these organs are directly affected by this stress. And there's more energy provided to the organs at this point. Now, I'm just talking emotional stress here. We're not talking individual organ stress. I'll get to that. But you're driving your system upward. So you're winding up. And you see here, it says sympathetic ganglia at the top of the spinal cord. The sympathetic ganglia, a term that I learned from working with a chiropractor who's also a functional neurologist and a functional nutritionist, is he would say, I'm sending you a client, Brian, they have basal ganglion windup. What that meant to me is this person was in sympathetic drive, which means it's going to affect their tissues and their organs. Because think of it this way, if you're under sympathetic drive and your kidneys are affected, your digestion is affected, because you're pushing out adrenaline and other hormones for fight to flight, your blood sugar changes, digestion changes, your heart rate accelerates, you're breathing more. Well, these organs are on higher demand when you're under sympathetic stress. So you have this red light going on, and the temperature goes up. And what do you think the brain is going to protect? Is it going to protect your organs? Is it going to protect your tissues? And that means all the ones that are deep too. You're right. It's going to protect the organs. So this is an example I used in the first series. So we'll talk about stability to the spine. So let's move from an example of a knee pain client to a back pain client. So I tell him you have a body problem. And he says, you know, Dr. Wallachy, that's the chiropractor I was working with in Asheville. He said, Dr. Wallachy sent me to you because he wants you to do some core strengthening for me. And again, I'm real big on teaching, because the misnomer with the core, we're getting here to the whole tissue idea, is where the hell is your core? Okay, so if I asked you, where's your core on this image? And when I've done this in workshops, live workshops, they point right here to the middle cylinder. I said, well, you're about right. That's the middle of it. That's the front. Here's the back side of the core. Look at that. The big latissimus muscles, the rector spinae, thoracolumbar fascia, trapezius, whoop, pectoralis, that's part of your core, trapezius. And then look at these glutes. Your glutes are part of your core. And I guarantee you, every single physical assessment I've done, one glute is stronger than the other. That also means that one side, we have an imbalance of strength, don't we? And on the front, you have a big muscle called the psoas. Look at how big that is. Big psoas muscle. And the psoas is what elevates your knee. So if I'm having a client do a single leg balance test, I want them to raise their knee up towards their chest. And they have to use their psoas to do that. Just to give you an idea what the psoas is, your hip flexor. That's part of your core. So I'm just taught that guy that it's not just your middle cylinder, it's the entire, what I call the upper, middle, and lower core on the front side of the body, and the upper, middle, lower core on the back side of the body. Now that's just the outer core. And if I peeled away your stomach, your abdomen, where your ribs are, it would look like this image down here. Let me see if I can bring this up for you. And there lies your inner core, ladies and gentlemen. And those are the stabilizers for your lower back or for your entire spinal column. I don't care if you have a cervical or upper spinal injury, or if you have a lower back or a lumbar lumbar spine injury. So now the patient is looking at me going, wow, I had no idea. I've been doing core exercises. And I said, yeah, you've been exercising the outer core, not the inner. And here's one more caveat for you. Your inner core operates on a different pathway compared to your outer core. Well, what does that mean? So let's say your core is, let's use an example like a stereo system. And you have to plug different things into the back of your stereo to have the speakers work. And if you're going to plug your DVD player in there, etc. And there's different pathways to operate these different systems that you're hooking up to your stereo. Well, in the body, the inner core has its own pathway. The reflex pathway is the same part of the nervous system that beats your heart. That's called your autonomic nervous system. Autonomic. It has to be automatic. You shouldn't have to think about it. But when this gentleman, or this person, I should say, this patient is referred to me and I assessed the inner core, I found out that it wasn't working at all. It was turned off. It was inhibited. Well, why was it turned off? Well, because part of the reason is they're in pain. Pain, again, we go back to our little example here. Pain is sympathetic. So when you're driven and your system's in pain, it will protect the organs and it will shut down. Here's another image. This is from the Czech Institute. This is like a belt around your waist. And we go back to this image. It's like a belt wrapped around your waist, and see how it directly innervates with the muscles that stabilize your spine. Your outer core is what they call a growth stabilizer. It does help, but your frontline defense is down deep inside. So it's been shut off. It's inhibited because the brain has got to protect the organs. It's under distress, fight to flight. It's in sympathetic mode. And that's just if you have pain. So my job is to reboot the system, because your brain is the central processing center. You have all these systems, including the musculoskeletal system. So here are the 10-dimensional systems of the body: skeletal, nervous, circulatory, lymphatic, reproductive, endocrine, urinary, respiratory, digestive, and muscular. And your body is going to reroute what it needs in order to protect the organ. So your tissues is what suffers. Your tissues are what get tight. Because if your inner core isn't working, your brain is going to call upon other muscles to support you. So we go back to this image. If you have a stability issue, going back to the example, the guy with the low back problem, the client, they have a stability issue. So what is the brain going to do? It's going to tighten the neck, tighten the shoulder, tighten the upper back, tighten the hips, tighten the hamstrings, tighten the ankles. It is compensating to provide as much support to the back as possible. And why is it supplying as much support to the back as possible? Why? Well, because what is inside of your spinal column? Your spinal cord. And how important is your spinal cord? Well, if I were to sever the electrical cord that plugs my computer into the outlet, you would see nothing. Because then you're cut off from your central processing unit. So I've had friends that were paraplegic and quadriplegic. And both of them were due to a spinal injury, spinal cord injury. So your brain is just trying to protect you. So if it has to compensate by tightening up these muscles, it'll do so. And herein, aha, now you begin to see how lifestyle changes, or lifestyle habits, I should say, affect these areas. So, all right, so we go back to the client that comes to me with the low back challenge, pain. And I've just asked a few questions about their physical part of their body. So I always, when I look at this image, I'll tell people the majority of the reason people come to me is because of principle number 4. Now it's a little bit different in the last couple of years. And I would say to them, when I would bring up this image, I would say, that's the 4th, that's the easiest part for me, for the most part. Corrective exercise, reprogramming your inner core. And again, going back to a computer system, when the inner core is inhibited, what does the word inhibit mean? To turn off. When the inner core is turned off, with my techniques and my education, I can reboot it by using a strategy and the repetition of patterns. I begin to rewrite that software. So your hard drive is up here in the brain, and everything outside of that is your software, and software can be remapped for the most part. It doesn't matter where it is, right? It doesn't matter if it's low back or whatever. But going back to lifestyle, you see here, now I start asking them questions. And now I want to go back to the 2 consultations. All right, so let's look at this. This is a brief survey. And you can see I'm already asking them questions about their lifestyle. And then I do a small rating of the 4 principles here, just asking a few questions. And there's the movement-related conditions that they may have. But you look at some of these questions. Here's the one on emotion. On a scale from 1 to 5, how would you rate your daily stress level? Which of these stress you out the most? How often do you feel anxious? And all the way to, do you frequently skip meals? Do you have skin irritations? Do you drink tap water? That's giving me some biochemical and neurological information. And then we get to movement. Do you have any movement related restrictions or pain? Have you had an injury? Have you ever had a head injury, concussion? And I look at what they currently are doing, what kind of exercises, and etc. And then finding out what their dream and their visions are. And then here's the joint by joint. So starting with the neck, shoulders, after I've asked them about their head. And a more comprehensive approach where I do a whole rating. And this is the Wellness and Movement Lifestyle Questionnaire, which is a lot more in detail. There's all the ratings, biochemical. Look at how much I go into nutrition, fungal parasite rating. Okay. And then more details for physical health. We come back to our 4 principles and I rate them for them. And then we find out what the rating is. And then I have to develop a strategy. But now that I have a subjective rating and I've created a wellness and movement plan, and these are things that they can start changing right now in their life to lower these ratings, then the next step, obviously, is for someone in pain is to go through my comprehensive physical assessment. Now, if you don't have any pain, I do the wellness movement survey and I just do an athletic movement screen, which involves posture, movement, flexibility, and core function. The comprehensive physical assessment does all that, but in more detail. And then they go on to phase 1A and B, and that's where we start the sub-base conditioning. Sub-base, what does that mean? We start from the inside out, the inner core, helping them lower their emotional stress. We start with the inside out, reducing their, or helping them manage their mind better. You don't manage stress, you manage your mind so that you can manage stress. You look at their sleep, get them into an anabolic response so they're building, get them out of a stress response so they're not breaking down or going into a catabolic response. Teaching them that hormones do play an important role. In fact, out of all the systems in your body, the number 1 system is your nervous system, number 2 is hormonal. Then we look at digestion. We know that digestion communicates with the brain. I teach them how that affects their core, when we eat, what we eat. And then, of course, movement is done by the orthopedic dilemma, which is what we're talking about here today. The stats that if you're not looking at lifestyle and you're not getting some sort of a physical assessment, you will end up with an exercise-induced injury. And the fitness industry, to me, is really behind the 8 ball on this. There's only a few organizations, and I hardly meet any trainers that do a comprehensive or any kind of a detailed health history or assessment. There are some that do, don't get me wrong, but I see too many that are not. And they're part of the challenge here. They're part of the equation to our movement-based problems because we're not looking at lifestyle. Again, when that person that came to me with lower back issues, the pain, I could tell them 2 things. I said, well, I can patch you up. No problem. But it'll come back. And this is what I started seeing from 1999 onward. That's why I had to go back to school. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. You know, my clients come to me and they said, geez, I've had this problem on and off, this challenge for 3 to 18 years. You've seen how many different people? And then between Dr. Wallachy and I, back then, now I work with a different chiropractor. Between Dr. Wallachy and I, our success rate was incredible, using our knowledge together by looking at the whole person and addressing the cause of their challenge. Because don't you want to get to the cause of it eventually? There's a time to patch. I get it. You got to get back to work, make a living. And if you're an athlete, you got to get back on the field. I get it. But eventually you're going to have to look at the whole body. So in a nutshell, what we have is we have a major issue, and we've done a fairly good job, even though the stats are continuing to go up. I can't figure that out. In my line of work, they're not going up because I have raised my standards. And like a medical professional, they should be doing no harm. Doing no harm means, as a trainer, as a fitness professional, if you want to call yourself that, if you're watching this, you need to raise your standards, because the clients you're working with, I don't care if they're young, and I definitely do care if they're older. Even the younger ones, we're having a lot more problems with physical strength capacity, mobility. I've seen more young adults and teenagers with low back and joint pain than I've ever seen in my career. It's uncalled for. What I'm telling you is this: raise your standards. And if you're watching this and you're considering, or you have a musculoskeletal injury, look at the cause of it. Now, there are no simple answers here, right? But what there is a decision and a commitment, both from the practitioner and the client, all right? I empower my clients with knowledge. That's why I'm doing this presentation, because the more you know, the more you grow. You won't be going through your next challenge. You should be growing through it. What can I learn from this? What are we not doing, Brian? Because my back pain is still coming back. What are they missing? And I don't know how many times someone was referred to me, and I refer them to my team, and I do my assessment, detailed health history, because the mystery's in the history. And I find all these unanswered questions and these tests that weren't done. Now it's important that we do something about it now. So what did we learn? We're learning here that lifestyle factors have to be taken into consideration when either rehabbing an injury or if you're trying to prevent injury. Because isn't exercise supposed to make you healthier? Well, then why do the exercise-related injuries keep going up? All right, let's leave it at that. I can go a lot more on this topic. I need to hear from you. I'm thinking about doing my next presentation on immunity because of the time of year and because of what we're dealing with. I got some great information for you. I got great experts around me. I don't ever do this alone. But I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And I always share because I care. I want you to have an awesome day and know that there's hope for anything that you're challenged with, because even if I can't find an answer, I will find someone that can. All right, live your day with passion, give thanks, and have gratitude for at least being alive. Have a great day, everybody. Bye for now.